Tonight we have with us Les Cox. Many of you may know him. He's a legend in the Teddy Roosevelt Council Boy Scouts, and he's talking tonight on leadership. Thank you, Les.
Most of you know me, I know most of you. If you don't, I'll just give you a brief resume. I've been 63 years in scouting. I was a scout in a troop that was run patrol method exclusively, so I had a lot of experience as a scout in that. When I became a scoutmaster a number of years later, I took up the study of original scouting under Baden-Powell, scouting for boys, and I applied the patrol method, and with great success. I developed terrific boy leaders who got the praise of other leaders to the point where other scoutmasters asked me to train their boy leaders, and I said, my leaders will do it. And we ran a weekend at Harkness and trained the leaders of 5 troops. My boys did the training, I didn't. I was just the advisor. And it was very successful. So I've had a good deal of experience with boy-run troop. And the first handout I have gives you a little history of boy-run troops as visualized by Baden-Powell and how it should be applied. Who knows the definition of a troop? Anybody give me a definition of a scout troop? No one. Anyone want to try? A scout troop is a group of patrols. It is not a bunch of scouts divided into patrols. It is a group of patrols, which emphasizes the fact that a patrol is the heart of scouting. That was Baden-Powell's idea. The patrol is the heart of scouting, not a troop. A troop is a group of patrols working together. That's very important in the concept of leadership and boy-run troop. The patrol method, as it was visualized by Baden-Powell, is very simple when you apply it. And here's a second handout. These handouts are things that I conceived mostly myself or with the help of my junior leaders for use over the years. Some of them date back pretty early, as you will soon find out, but they still apply. Boy-run troops are the heart of scouting. The patrol is the heart. And once you've developed the patrol leadership and developed the patrols and the Green Bar Patrol Leaders Council, then you apply the boy-run concept to everything that the troop does. And the patrol is never broken up. I've been frustrated a number of times in my career when other leaders would break up a working patrol because of some convenience to themselves. Like going to summer camp, they took an excellent patrol, had a great record, and they split it up, destroyed that patrol. Within a year, 6 of those 8 boys dropped out of scouting. If they had kept that patrol and kept that leadership going, they would have had those kids still in scouting. So it's very important when you build patrol unity and patrol spirit that you maintain it. On the back of that first handout is a list of my concept of what a good troop consists of. And this has nothing to do with scoring quality troops or quality patrols or quality anything else or any of these other concepts that National puts out to rating troops. This is from the standpoint of good, intelligent adult leadership. These are the concepts that are important to a good troop. That's all that means. And on the handout on the patrol method in a nutshell, again, it's very important to understand that the patrol is the heart of scouting. You bring them together to work together as patrols, competing against one another and not breaking them up, and governing the troop with an elected senior patrol leader and elected patrol leaders. and the adults are strictly in the background as advisors and consultants. And only if they need to be vetoed, you have the right of veto as an adult leader. If the scouts say, we want to fly to the moon next week, you have to veto that because that's not very practical. But other than that, the boys' decisions are what counts. And unless you're in doubt about why we use boy leadership, the next sheet is 10 reasons to develop boy leadership in your troop. And what that basically is you've got to have confidence in the boy leaders that they will do the job. And one of the biggest problems that we've had in adult leadership is the adult leaders do not have confidence that a boy can be a leader. And what that means is they are afraid to practice democracy in the troop. It's okay to preach democracy, but they're not allowed to practice it in the troop. Why not? The idea of boy leadership is practicing democracy. And that's what we want to train boys to do to become good citizens. So these reasons for developing boy leadership are very important. The next one I'm going to hand out is not my development. It was developed by my junior leaders back in 1954. When I became a scoutmaster in 1952, one of the problems I found immediately was the scouts would vote for the popular kid for senior patrol leader. The popular kid is not necessarily the best leader. So to cure that, I sat my green bar down and said, let's discuss what the job is of senior patrol leader and what qualities the leader should have to do the job. And they developed this sheet that I'm handing out now. The job to be done and who can do it best. And these ideas came from the scouts themselves with very little prompting. And once they developed this, I published it, and thereafter, every time we had a senior patrol leader election, this sheet was distributed to the scouts ahead of time, and it was lobbying, if you will. It was educating the voter as to how they should vote for the best person. And the technique I used throughout the year was that whenever one of my junior leaders did a good job, I praised him in front of the troop. And whenever they did something wrong, I talked to him privately to correct him. By the end of the year, through that episode after episode of leadership demonstration in the troop, they knew who to vote for to make the best senior patrol leader. And I never had in this situation where I got the wrong senior patrol leader. It was always the best qualified leader in the troop that was elected every time, with no speaking on my part other than to hand out these sheets and say, follow this in your voting. One year I had two scouts who were both excellent junior leaders, and they were both up for election, and one of them won by one vote out of the whole green bar. And by that time we had about 6 patrols. And the loser was disappointed because he had lost by only 1 vote. But I said, be patient, you'll get your chance next year. And sure enough, he was elected the following year. So both of those junior leaders got their opportunity to be senior patrol leader. I never kept a senior patrol leader longer than a year. Why? Because I wanted to keep the moving of the junior leaders, the training. And if you cut off that by making the same senior patrol leader year after year, they get discouraged. They're not going to go anywhere, and they're likely to drop out. And they will not be showing good leadership. But if they want to be senior patrol leader, they get their opportunity every year. That I felt was very important. Okay, next we come to Oh, the back of the Senior Patrol Leader sheet is Boy Scouting in a nutshell, and that's just a reminder of what Scouting is really all about and what we should be thinking of when we're running the program. Too often, I think leaders get far afield because they get all of these conflicting things thrown at them, Friends of Scouting, training courses, management concepts, all the rest of it, and they forget the fundamentals. So this is a summary of the fundamentals of Scouting in a nutshell for periodic review. The next one is the rules for Scoutmasters. And this I developed myself over the years, and if you won't find this in the Scoutmaster's Manual, because this is my own personal concept, developed probably about 15 or 20 years ago, but still applicable today. And I'll just review these because they're what's important to you. Stick to your job. Don't try to do everybody else's job. I know too many Scoutmasters who are making all the efforts to make reservations for camping trips, for going to the council office to buy badges, doing all these jobs that a troop committee or assistant scoutmaster should be doing. The scoutmaster has two jobs to do: train his junior leaders and help each individual boy. That's it. Second, share important decisions. The Patrol Leaders Council makes all of the key decisions in the troop, not the scoutmaster. The boys are running the troop. He presents the problems that they come up to the Patrol Leaders Council. Senior Patrol Leader conducts a discussion, and the Senior Patrol Leader, the Patrol Leaders Council votes on what their decisions are. Scoutmaster does not make the decisions. Establish discipline. Boys need to know rules. They need to know limits. Their limits are constantly expanding as they grow, and you have to be aware of that. When a kid is 11 years old, he's got pretty well-defined boundaries as to what he can do and say and be. As he gets older, those limits are expanding all the time. You have to know what you want in the way of discipline in the troop and make sure the boys understand reasonable rules. No swearing at any time, no bullying. These are the type of rules that you set up, and you enforce them fairly and rigorously. Once you do that, you establish a pattern, you have no problem. One of my favorite stories in my experience is when I was scoutmaster and I was late to getting to a troop meeting. The troop met in a school gymnasium. When I got to the building, I expected to find the troop sitting on the steps of the school because the school board had a rule: any child activity in the school at night had to have an adult at all times. I got to the school and there was nobody on the steps. I rang the bell and custodian came to the door and opened it. And I said, "What happened to my troop?" He says, "They're down in the gym." I said, "You disobeyed the rule?" And he said, "I don't worry about your troop." And I went down in the gym, and a 13-year-old senior patrol leader with 40 scouts was running the meeting, no adults present. He had finished the opening ceremony and was getting patrol reports when I came in. So I had to compliment the whole troop on their, not only on that night's discipline in running properly in the troop meeting without a problem, but the fact that they had impressed the custodian. At another time, there was some damage to mats in the gymnasium, and the coaches in the gym blamed the scout troop to the principal. The custodian, on his own volition, went to the principal and said, "The scouts did not do it." He knew that they would not do any damage to anything in the gym. And he pled our case without my knowledge. And the troop was not blamed for the damage to the mats. Good troop discipline gets you the rewards. Develop leadership skills. Get to training yourself and train your junior leaders. That's your job. Set the example. Keep alert to morale. That means just keeping observant and watching and listening. The Scouts will tell you things that they wouldn't even tell their own parents if you get close enough to them and become their friend. I've had Scouts tell me things that I'm sure they would never tell their parents. And they told me them because they trusted me. And I had their trust. And I trusted them. Be a friend to every Scout. Be impartial, but cultivate a personal friendship with each Scout, because you will have a major impact on his character. Avoid personal advancement. Too many leaders are out to get a row of knots on their chest and all of the awards that they can earn. I can say honestly that I have never applied for anything that I've got in the way of an award. It always came unknown to me later, when I had never put in an application for any of them. And I think that's the attitude a good Scoutmaster should have. He shouldn't care about his own leadership or his own awards. What he should care about is the health and welfare of his troop. That also applies to multiple jobs. Too many Scoutmasters take on other jobs, whether they're involved with the OA or in camp or in training or something else. A Scoutmaster's full-time job is his troop. And if he does the job right, his troop is going to grow. It invariably will grow. My troop grew from 25 kids when I took it over to 75 kids when we put a lid on it. We couldn't take any more because of transportation problems. If you run a boy-run patrol method troop, your troop is bound to grow, invariably, because it's a good program and the kids flock to it. They tell their friends and they bring them in. I never had a recruiting problem once I had that troop operating. Stick to scouting. Know and keep it to scouting policies and practices. Run a scouting program with a patrol method and high quality advancement. Avoid personal advancement. Again, don't be concerned with your own badges. Be modest and praise others. I've constantly praised my Scouts and I never took credit for myself. I knew that what I was doing was benefiting the troop, but I didn't brag about it to the troop or to any other troop leaders. I put the praise on the junior leaders. That's why I had them run the training course for the other junior leaders and other troops, because they were the ones that were doing it. They trained the other kids on how to do it. And keep it perspective. If you make mistakes or other slip-ups, that's not the end of the world. You must admit your mistakes to your Scouts. Don't be shy about being frank with them. If you goof on something, tell them you goofed, and they'll forgive you. Organize your job. Take time to plan and use your resources. Those 12 rules that I thought up are a result of my experience with the troop, and I think they would apply to any troop. And the Scouter skills that follow are also along that line. Any questions up to this point?
Just a comment, Les.
Ask Rick, because I can't hear very well and he'll repeat it.
No, it's just a good comment on your points with a good troop. Makes a note here on live encourages individual advancement, gives prompt review recognition. I think that's important. I know some troops wait for court of honors and whatnot, but what we do in our troop is
Having reasonable rules in your troop is very important, and one of them is rapid recognition of advancement.
right. That's what we do.
When I took my troop to summer camp, and I did that for 10 straight years on to Europe for 2 weeks at a time, we always had a board review on Friday night before the term ended, and court of honor was at the campfire that night, and we made the awards of the ranks they had earned in camp right there in camp before they went home. So they went home to their families with their badges that they had earned at camp. And I don't know if that may be more difficult today because of the restrictions they put on buying badges, but we bought the badges in advance that we thought they were going to earn, and we had them there, and we awarded them, and they went home with them. And whenever we ran a court of honor, it was always regularly after rapid advancement. We never let the Scout wait to get his badge. Sometimes we awarded him his badge at a troop meeting closing, and then at a later court of honor, we recognized those that had gotten their badges. But a scout who earns his badge wants to wear it right away. He doesn't want to wait 3 months. I know troops that will keep Eagle Scouts waiting for 6 months before they hold an Eagle ceremony after they've earned their Eagle. Why? Make it quick. Even if it isn't a big elaborate ceremony with letters from the Pope and the President. That's all hogwash as far as I'm concerned. It's important to recognize them. I recognized 2 Eagles at an outdoor campfire at Harkness with the parents there, and we awarded the Eagle at the campfire, and I think it was one of the most impressive Eagle ceremonies that I had been to, even since. So it doesn't have to be a big elaborate thing. It doesn't have to have all of these politicians with their photographers there. You can do it at a private troop and parent event and give their kid the right recognition. Those are my personal views.
One question, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the older times of scouting, okay, it was much easier, I think, to discipline boys, okay? They knew when they were wrong, and then when they were wrong, they were disciplined, and they accepted it. In today's day and age, I think boys are not as willing to accept discipline. And how would you recommend disciplining boys in today's day and time?
Okay, I'll grant you that in today's society, there are problems that didn't exist during my heyday as Scoutmaster. They've changed over the years. And we've got this over-attentiveness of parents, particularly mothers, helicopter mothers that hover over their kids every minute of the day. If they do something wrong in school, it's the school that's at fault, the teacher is at fault, never the kid. And that is what is wrong in our society today, in my opinion. And we have to try to straighten that out. And in scouting, if a scout has given a fair chance, if he does something wrong, I first would talk to him privately and discuss and find out what the background and the faults were and where things had gone wrong. But one of these things says that I've handed out or will hand out is that if a boy fails, this leader has failed. And if you can figure that any kid in your troop that fails in some way, then your leadership is partly to blame, because you did not apply your leadership adequately in that case to see the problem before it occurred and do something about it. That is why I say your job is to pay attention to every kid in the troop. Train your junior leaders and pay attention to every kid in the troop. Every kid is important. I had a kid, and I've told Rick about this at camp. We discussed a lot of these things at summer camp. Boy came into my troop who was he was foster parents. His parents were dead. He was an orphan. And he had a police record having broken into 3 gas stations and robbed them. And at 11 years old, he was brought down by his foster mother and asked if we would take him in the troop. And I said we'd take him. And we took him into the troop, and I assigned him to my best patrol leader and his patrol. And at his first patrol meeting, he set off a cherry bomb and blew out 2 windows in the patrol leader's house. That was the kind of a kid he was. And he caused no end of problems from that point on, fights with other scouts, problems all along the line. And finally, the parents complained, and the troop committee called me in and said, get rid of this kid, he's going to ruin the troop. You got to get rid of him. So I said, this is a boy-run troop. Patrol Leaders Council will decide. And I took it up with the Patrol Leaders Council and told them the boy's background, his police record, all of the problems he had at home and in school, the problems he'd given us in the troop, the complaints of the parents, the complaints of the troop committee. I said, you have to decide to kick him out or keep him. It's your decision. And a couple of patrol leaders says, well, we better kick him out. His own patrol leader stood up for him and said, he's been attending every patrol meeting, every troop meeting. He goes on every camping trip. He needs time to learn our ways, do better. And what is scouting all about? Isn't it supposed to help boys like him? And the senior patrol leader asked my opinion, and I said, if this patrol leader wants him and this council votes to keep him, then I'll back you up with the parents and this committee. They voted unanimously to keep him. And over the next 3 or 4 years, he got better. It took time, but he got better. When the parents found out that the Patrol Leaders Council had voted to keep him, they shut up. They didn't say any complain anymore. And after a few years, he dropped out of the troop somewhere along the line. I don't even remember when or where, because the troop was large at that time, and there were a lot of kids. So 12 years later, I'm on the street with 2 other scouts, and this young man comes up to me, great big tall fellow by that time, and introduces himself as that problem scout. And he said scouting was the first place in his life that he felt welcomed and part of, and that he felt a part of a team part of it. And he enjoyed it, and he wanted to thank me for his scouting thing. If it wasn't for scouting, he'd be in jail. He now had a wife and a child, and he was a master carpenter with a good job. And he said scouting had changed his life. Well, that was a big shock to me, because I had handled this kid like a problem kid and just hoped he'd get a little better. But it had changed his life. And that was paying attention. He never made Eagle. He made first class, I think, before he dropped out of the troop. But it was important to his life, and I can go to my maker and say I changed an individual's life by keeping that kid in the troop. And I think that's a mark of success. And that's what I would like every unit leader to think about. Every boy in his troop, no matter how weak a scout he is or whatever problems he's got at home, try to guide him and help him. You may be the biggest influence on his life in the future. And that's what scouting is all about. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, Les. In our troop, we do use the patrol method. Where it breaks down is on camping weekends. You know, there's so much competition from school activities, sports, travel teams, you name it, band, you know, orchestra, choir, all these activities on weekends, that many a times, even though we get very good, very high percentage attendance at our troop meetings, we're very happy with that, but when it comes to a lot of the camping weekends, there'll only be 2 or 3 maybe in any given patrol, and we have to combine those patrols, and for the weekend, you know, any camaraderie you have at the Monday night meeting, or our meetings are on Monday night, are lost, you know, for the most part on the weekend. What do you think about that?
Well, I agree that, again, it's a problem more than it was in my day. I was scoutmastering back in the days when 2-deep leadership wasn't required. I used to go out with 25 or 30 kids while I was the only adult. And I never worried, because my junior leaders were so good. I knew that they were as good as an adult being there. I had one boy get sick on a weekend. A senior patrol leader got sick when I was out at shift in one of the cabins over the gulch. And I decided I had to take him home because he was ill. So fortunately, there was a Port Washington troop in the next cabin, in the old outpost cabin, that I knew well, and I spoke to the scoutmaster and said, would you watch the troop while I take the SPL home? He says, oh, I think they'll do all right, so I'll watch them. I took the senior patrol leader home. It took me an hour to take him home and an hour to get back, so I was going about 2 hours. I got back about midnight. The troop was all quiet and asleep. And the next morning I asked the scoutmaster, he said, your troop held a council fire because I heard them singing at the council fire, and they went to bed, no problem, under the leadership of a substitute senior patrol leader, one of the patrol leaders I had appointed as substitute senior patrol leader while I was gone. And that was an example of, again, of good leadership. Now, in answer to your problem, I had problem when scouts were playing baseball in a police athletic league, conflicting with my troop meeting. And the scouts were coming to troop meeting in baseball uniforms, and I didn't like that. So I got in touch with a police sergeant who was in charge of the PAL in town and spoke to him and explained the problem. And he agreed to change his baseball schedule so that no games occurred on Thursday nights when I had my troop meeting. So he changed the whole schedule, took all of the competitions off on Thursday, so my troop didn't have a problem after that on attendance. So one suggestion I make is try to negotiate with these other conflicting events, sports or whatever, to try to reach a meeting ground. You're all trying to help kids, whether it's a baseball team or a scout troop. Let's work together. And this police sergeant was willing to work and avoid Thursday nights for my troop. As far as going on the weekends, a lot has to do with how good a program you've got for the weekend. If you're camping at camp out as another routine camp out that's going to deal only with scout craft for the youngest scouts, the older scouts are not going to be interested. The 13 or 14-year-olds who have other interests in sports and so on are going to be more interested in the sports because it's more exciting to them at that point. But if you have a program that's exciting on that weekend, they'll come, I believe. So it's very important to develop a thriving, exciting program to keep those scouts. Otherwise, you lose out to the competition. We used to say that we're in competition with things like Little League, but at least Little League is baseball. It's played outdoors. If your program is not an outdoor program, you're going to suffer. You've got to compete with the other programs and offer a program that's going to offer a challenge that they'll want to come. It can't be just a routine overnight. I can understand a kid of 13 or 14 not wishing to go out on another weekend where all he does is work with tenderfeet scouts. It's got to be something challenging. My kids, I encouraged to use their imagination. We did crazy things. We went on one weekend out at Schiff where we secretly reserved a lean-to site on the other side of camp, and we camped in tents on the other side in Indian Division. And 2 o'clock in the morning, we woke up the whole troop in their tents and said, get out and put your packs on, bring your sleeping bag, we're going. And they couldn't understand what was going on. And we packed them up and hiked in a remote route around the camp and ended up at the lean-tos, and we put them all to bed. Completely crazy. But that's what the senior patrol leader and the Green Guard wanted to do, and we did it. And it was a challenging thing because it was a surprise to the kids. They didn't know what was going on. Hiking at 2 o'clock in the morning? In the dark? And it was something that they talked about for a long time after that. It was exciting. So again, make your program different. Think out of the box. That's what makes scouting exciting. One time we ran a troop meeting backwards. We started the troop meeting with the closing ceremony, and we ran everything backwards. We had the game, and we did the scout craft, everything. We ended up with the opening ceremony. And that was a complete surprise to the troop. The only ones who knew it was going to happen were the patrol leaders and the senior patrol leader. And that was exciting to them because it was different. It was a completely different thing to them. So anything that you can do that's unusual and different and out of the box will excite your scouts and keep them interested. That's all I can offer in that. I recognize you still have a big problem today competing with other activities. Now, we spoke earlier about the Order of the Arrow. How many of you use the Order of the Arrow in your troop? All right, some years ago when we were having trouble getting unit leaders interested in using the Order of the Arrow because some unit leaders think that it's going to take boys away from them, from the troop. So I wrote this 10 reasons to use the Order of the Arrow in your troop to try to educate the unit leaders to the fact that the Order of the Arrow was a benefit to their troop and would help them keep older boys active in the troop. I had 2 boys who became Eagles that stayed with the troop through their 18th birthdays before they left for college. And they were a tremendous aid to the troop. They were better to me than assistant scoutmasters because they were Eagle trained and had their heart's interest in the troop. And they stayed with me a long time. And they were both active in the Order of the Arrow. More? So when you get time to study these cheats in detail, you will find some ideas in them that possibly conflict with things that you've heard in Scout leader training or in the manuals. But all I can say is they represent 63 years of scouting, in my experience, and practical running of a troop that was successful. In addition to that troop, I've been scoutmaster of 2 other troops, one of them being a troop consisting of all black and Latino kids in Hempstead. I was scoutmaster of that troop for 2 years, and I was scoutmaster of another troop when the scoutmaster had to step down because his son became very ill. And he asked me to take it over, and I ran it for another 1.5 years before they found another man to take it as scoutmaster. So I've been scoutmaster of 3 troops. I've been a leader at 4 national jamborees. I visited a world jamboree in Canada, and I've been assistant to 3 other troops, assistant scoutmaster to 3 other troops, and neighborhood commissioner to 5 or 6 other troops. So I've had the gamut of experience, a lot of different boys, a lot of different problems. And I think what I've learned, and I've tried to sum it up on these sheets, is worthwhile taking into consideration. And I think the one rule I would like you to think about and stay with you is your job consists of 2 things: training your junior leaders to do the job right and helping each individual boy to grow, regardless of whether he gets the Eagle or not. Those are your main jobs. Everything else, somebody else should be doing, some parent or committee person, not you, if you're the scoutmaster. I'll just touch a minute on, if I've got time, on scouting history. A lot of people are not familiar with the details of scouting history. Who do you think was the chief founder of scouting in America? A lot of people would say Boyce, William Boyce from Chicago, because he had that episode in London with the fog. Wasn't him. Wasn't Dan Beard, wasn't Seton. There was a man called Edgar Robinson who doesn't get the credit that he should. But he was the one that gathered a group in New York City consisting of bankers and the leaders of all of the youth organizations in the country. The YMCA, YMCHA, the Big Brothers and Big Sisters. He got all of those people to come together, and he recruited Beard and Seton to join the group and said, we need a national organization, because he had sent out a memo to the YMCA. He was an executive in New York of the YMCA, and he sent out in June 1910 a memo to every YMCA branch in the country, which he said, there is evidently an avalanche coming, and we would do well to prepare for it. Be prepared is the Boy Scout motto. The Boy Scouts will doubtless become the largest boys organization in America. This movement bids fair to sweep the country in a way no organization of boys has ever done. So he had the foresight to see what was coming and what was going to happen. He was instrumental in recruiting James E. West. He himself served the first year as the executive secretary of the Boy Scouts of America. When he heard that Boyce had copyrighted the name, he went to Chicago, took the first train to Chicago, and recruited Boyce to come to New York and join his group in New York with the name Boy Scouts of America. So I believe he was the chief founder of the Boy Scouts of America, because he saw what was happening with these troops springing up, patrols and troops springing up across the country. He recruited this bunch together. He brought everybody together. Beard and Seton hated each other's guts. They were jealous of one another. Both had big egos. He got them to work together. And as I say, he was instrumental in bringing in James E. West, who agreed to work for 6 months and stayed for 32 years. So if you want to give credit to an individual that was instrumental in founding the Boy Scouts of America, give it to Edgar Robinson. He went back to the YMCA after he had served his year with the Boy Scouts. He continued to support scouting nationally, but he was back in the YMCA, so he dropped out of scouting history. He didn't stay on with Seton and Beard and become famous as icons. So people have forgotten about him, and you'll find his mention in the Boy Scout history books. You'll find mention of him, but no real credit given. That's just my opinion, having read all these histories. I think he gets the credit. Let's see, what else? Any other questions?
Les, I want to go back to what you talked about with electing senior patrol leaders. Our troop generally does allow the boy to re-elect a senior patrol leader if they're happy with his leadership for a second year. What do you think about the idea of promoting the tenured senior patrol leader to junior assistant scoutmaster and thereby allowing a new senior patrol leader to come in?
I didn't hear all of that, I'm sorry.
I wanted to know if, in his patrol, in his troop, they allow second-year senior patrol leaders.
Uh-huh.
And he
All
wanted
right.
to know your opinion on, instead of allowing the second year, promoting the previous senior patrol leader to junior assistant scoutmaster.
Okay. I always did it every year because we'd go to summer camp every year, and the current senior patrol leader and the newly elected, we always held the elections in June. The newly elected senior patrol leader and the old senior patrol leader went to summer camp together, and the old one trained the new one in summer camp. Trained him in silent signals for running the troop, and in how to lead campfires and all the details of the running of the troop. So we had 2 weeks to train him so that when September came, the new senior patrol leader was ready to go. He'd been trained and he could take over and didn't have any qualms about what he had to do. So that worked excellently, as I say, for at least 10 years. So if you've got a good senior patrol leader, you're reluctant to lose him. But our senior patrol leaders, when they were voted out of office and the new one was elected, they became automatically JASMs. So they were still active in the troop, and I used them as troop guide and JASM in any way that I could fit them in. So they were constantly a part of the troop. And they were sort of like many of our scouters that go into Sagamores. They're sort of retired on their honors. And I never had a bit of resentment on that part. I had a couple of parents that didn't like it when their senior patrol leader's son was superseded by another senior patrol leader. They would like to see him in there permanently. And I've known troops that have had the same senior patrol leader for 4 or 5 years. Troop 45 in Mineola, which is a very strong troop, run patrol method. They had 60 boys in camp this summer and 12 adults with them. Biggest troop we had in camp. And they do use the patrol method, but they kept the same senior patrol leader for several years. And as I say, in my opinion, they're cutting off the ascendancy of leadership of boys coming up behind them. They're discouraging those kids and not going to getting a chance to be senior patrol leader. So I would strongly advocate an annual election. And yes, it's hard to give up a good senior patrol leader, but if you keep him in by getting him on camp staff, getting him as in the Order of the Arrow. My best senior patrol leader, the one I was most proudest of, was a young boy of 12 when I spotted him with leadership potential and got him into a patrol. He was elected patrol leader. He went on from there. When he was Star Scout, I got him to apply as a representative to go to the World Jamboree in Canada. Nassau County had a quota of 6 scouts who were allowed to go, no more, because they didn't want American scouts overrunning the Jamboree in Canada. So I got him to apply. I was informed that he was one of 12 finalists, and they all 12 had to be interviewed by a special committee in Hempstead. I took him over for the interview, and the interviews were completed. The chairman of the selection committee told me that my kid was the first one selected unanimously by the committee, a Star Scout. The other 5 selected were Eagle Scouts. So the 6 of them went, 5 Eagles and 1 Star Scout, went to the World Jamboree in Canada. And that kid served on camp staff at Schiff for 10 years, through high school, college, and law school. For 10 years straight, ended up as program director at Schiff before he went into the Air Force. So he was a tremendous kid, a tremendous talented junior leader, but he was, after his first year as senior patrol leader, he was knocked out with a new senior patrol leader elected, who was good, not as good as he was, but he was good. So I wasn't sorry. And he wasn't sorry either because he had lots of other things to do. So that's my experience, and that's what I recommend. Annual election of SPL. Yes?
What about just almost like the opposite, where you have a number of kids that could become senior patrol leader? You have so many that, you have one per year, but by the time some of these others want to become a senior patrol leader, they're going to age out of that position. So,
Well, if you've got a number of good junior leaders, and if you have a good program, you'll get a number of good junior leaders. It's competitive, and they've got to learn in the world at large, when they go out into the world, it's competitive. And if they run for president of the United States, they're in competition with somebody. And they've got to take their chances if they win or lose. So it's the same within the troop. You're teaching them democracy. And if your troop grows, I had 2 assistant senior patrol leaders in my troop when I had 6 patrols. And so that gave two kids leadership. Each of them was in charge of 3 patrols. So they were under the senior patrol leader, but they had responsibilities of their own. So that's one way of dividing it up when your troop gets large.
When I had over 100, my troop did 6 months terms. When I had over 100 kids, my troop, it was 6-month term. And I didn't let them rerun.
Okay. All right. Anything else? Otherwise, it's 9 o'clock and I better quit.